there, so I went over there. About the time I got there, she called. She said, uh, she's been transferred, Jerry. And I said, well, that's good. I said, my car's back there. Our car's back there getting some work on it. I said, I'm going to see if I can get some way to get over there where they have the shuttle.
Yeah.
She's a doer. She's in assisted. Is it assisted thing?
It's a skilled nursing rehab.
Skilled nursing.
Yeah.
Will she need somebody to come this week?
Yeah. I guess me a little break. Have some more copies of the handout. We are in the book of Isaiah, as you know. Chris did such a tremendous job last week of assisting us in a transition. That was just what an amazing strengthening of the bridge, and especially to spend the time in the history of the Old Testament to say, now let's realize what's going on. So we come again to the book of Isaiah, and we are, of course, still in Isaiah 40. I think that Chris did this intentionally. Did you notice that he taught the class, and thank you very much again, but we didn't make any progress? So he just left it where we were, which is good because I hope that we're oriented, we've caught our breath. On this handout, if you, it's not different than what you've seen, but if you needed one, I guess that's all I have now. I want to think with you about Isaiah 40 to 66. We have 27 chapters. That's what we have to do in March and April. So we're not in a big hurry. We do need to see if we can get through 2 or 3 or 4 chapters a week. But a lot of times when you're reading a book, you really don't want to read the last of it and to know what's going on. You want to kind of let the suspense build. But when we begin to read a book like Isaiah, at least for me, it's really helpful to have a roadmap. It's really helpful to know where we're going. And so we've gone through 39 chapters, 36 chapters, or 35 before the bridge, the historical bridge. And all of that had to do with something that was going to happen probably within 50 to 100 years of Isaiah's lifetime. And it was very current. Don't worry, rely on God. We have various themes that have been suggested. One of them is that whole idea of confidence, or who do you trust, who do you rely on? Another one is, hey, God's going to keep a remnant. God's going to have someone that he brings through this. Are you going to be part of it? And then, as Chris mentioned last week, another possibility is that this is written simply as a message of comfort, that it's a message of consolation. And so in a kind of a current situation, we transition, and we really struggle with this, and I'm not sure why it's such an overwhelming problem for some people. And that is that Isaiah is writing something to inform the people of his day. But as we read it, we are impressed with how much help it's also going to be for the people once they're in exile. And so it's going to have an application 100 years down the road from where Isaiah is. I think catching that truth then should help us understand, how do I make an application in my own life? What do I understand today? And so as we try to put this in context, again, nothing new here. You've already seen it. This would be the first part of the book, the 35 chapters that are pretty current in Isaiah's time, the historical bridge, and we come to, it's interesting because, well, I'm a math person, and so one of my favorite ways of organizing this as I read various commentaries and so on is to think about the 9 chapter groups, the Enneads, if you will, but the 9 chapter groups. I think there's a little imperfection in that, but you know, we do have the 9 times 27. That's how many chapters we have to deal with. Here is what's going on in Isaiah 40 to 48. But first I want to go to our sheet for those of you who have one, and I want to give my version. I kind of redacted this, as I mentioned, from some study notes. Okay, so here's 40 to 48. You guys have royally messed up my promise to you. I made a promise to you, and you've gotten so far off track that I'm not even going to be able to keep my promise to you without a whole lot of effort on my part to get you back on track. And so the situation obviously is, I'm going to display my glory. Well, how did they get off track? Well, they quit following him. They began to rely on other nations. They began to rely on themselves. They began to rely on idols. They began to think that their security was in some other source. And they lost sight of the covenant. They lost sight of his promise. They lost sight of his plan. So he says, and here's how we say it, I'm trying to get ready for this great work I was planning for you, but you've got to go home. You've got to go home, back to the promised land. That's the very end of chapter 48. I'm not going to be able to do a thing for you till you get home. But don't think I'm going to rescue you too quick, because you're going to pay the price. I want you to remember, this is, you know, I'm not going to let you off. I think he'd already let him off a whole bunch of times. I'm not going to let you off. And so God says, I'm going to get back into and move in the history of this people who are my people. I'm still committed to you. I'm still your father, but it may not feel like it every day. You may not like it. May not be a good parent in your mind, but justice will be served. I'm just looking at some thoughts here, and I'm going to do what I promised to do, not because you deserve it any longer, but because I'm God, and I'm consistent. And so just because you have been so weak-faithed, that's kind of how he describes it in chapter 48, I'm still going to free you from Babylon for the sake of my name. I don't want anyone saying, well, see, there's a God who can't rescue his people. So I'm going to show you that I'm God, and you'll have every evidence to believe. I'm back. Once I get back on track, and you've got to go home to get back on track, but once we get back on track, I'm still going to send the suffering servant. And that's 49 through 57. That's where we read Isaiah 53. The one who will be the exalted sin bearer for the iniquities and the transgressions of the people, giving compassion, giving comfort to get you out of your captivity, which is really your worst problem. It's not that you went to Egypt. It's not that you're going to be in Babylon. Your worst problem is you can't deal with sin. And I'm going to send this exalted sin bearer, this Messiah, this suffering servant. There are 4 what we call suffering servant poems or sections in the book of Isaiah. And to try to help you understand who you really are. I want to redefine who my people are. Because if we can get that done, if we can get you back on track, and if we can go back to accomplish what my plan was in the promise to Abraham, to send one through whom you and the nations of the world would be blessed, then we will get back to the ultimate restoration or renewal, which was my goal all along. This is 58 through 66 again. As we look to the coming of the suffering servant, who will be able to redefine and reestablish his people in a renewed order, the kingdom order, then you will have an unshakable kingdom. Because I'll tell you what, the way you guys have lived out kingdom, even though I promised that you would be a kingdom of priests, the way you guys have done kingdom has been really, really fragile. And you really haven't, you haven't gotten your mind wrapped around how gloriously blessed you could have been if you had just maintained relationship with me as a part of my family. And so we're going to have this unshakable kingdom. And when this suffering servant comes and we establish this unshakable kingdom, we're not going to put the Davidic lineage at risk again. Because you remember, as they were being willing to submit themselves and so some of the nations around, they were actually saying, hey, you know, if you know better than the one in the Davidic lineage as a king, we'll put you in charge. No, you can't do that. And so here's where we are, and I'm going to try to make some sense of that for you today in chapter 40 and onward probably for a chapter or two. So if you were needing comfort, what would you find helpful? You're in a situation, the text begins, as Chris pointed out last week, comfort, comfort. My people, says your God. Speaking tenderly, proclaiming to her that her hard service has been paid for. She has received from the Lord's hand. It says double in the translation, but that's a Hebrew idiom that probably means enough or sufficient. Another one says that her iniquities have been filled up. It's kind of the same idea. And so there's various ways you can communicate that. Hebrew is a very simple language. And so sometimes the forms are very difficult to translate. For instance, the way that they provide many times deal with the plural or the intense form is with Holy of Holies or Water of Waters. And so if you find a Bible that actually translates literally, you'll find some of those kinds of things to give it an intense form. And what we translate, Holy of Holies, like in the book of Hebrews, we actually have that as a translation in some of our translations. That just means the most holy place. The Holy of Holies, because you have the holy place, and then you have the Holy of Holies, which is the most holy place. And so those are the same phrase. But it's very confusing to us, is it not? As we read multiple translations, we say, well, why'd they do that way and someone else do it this way? Trust your translation if you have a reasonably good translation. And as you do comparison, every once in a while we come up with things that give us more problems rather than help in that. So here's God. I'm sorry I got off the subject. Yeah, that was a detour, and it was free also. That comment was free. So if you were in need of comfort, what would be comforting? His tolerance. Okay. Okay. That's true. That's true. So, yeah. So I'm just thinking about daily life. I'm trying to start with an illustration. So if you needed comfort, what would be helpful to you? Prayer. A hug.
For them, it might be to go home.
Okay, to go home. They're gonna. In fact, he says you got to go home. What would be helpful to you? Let me tell you what I think is the most helpful. I like the prayer. I like the hug. I just need to hear you. I just need to hear your voice. I need your words. I need your words in prayer. I need your unspoken words in the hug. And of course, that's how Jan does it. So we get all these hugs. For those of you who remember this church and know it from way back, when we moved here, I.B. Branscombe was the treasurer. And if you remember I.B. and know anything at all about his personality, and I'm not sure he ever hugged anybody else down at the church house, but he hugged Jan because she hugged him. So he more than once said to her, you're about to turn me into a hugger. So, which was a kind of an interesting comment from IB. So, yes, we do need the hugs. Yes, we do need the prayers, but we need the words. So, again, I'm a big picture person, so look at this. 40 and verse 3, a voice of one calling in the wilderness. What does God want to say? Now, we know this is about John the Baptist, ultimately. It's going to be messianic. But what is the voice? Kind of catch the overall, because there's a summary statement in each one of these statements. There's a summary at the end of each one of these statements. What is this voice wanting to communicate? Verse 5, the glory of the Lord will be revealed. So here I need comfort. What's the message of comfort? God's going to come through. God's going to come through. The glory of the Lord. And that's so much more than just some kind of a halo, Shekinah type thing. That is faithful God living out glorious blessing in our lives. The glory of the Lord will be revealed because God said it, before the mouth of the Lord has spoken, and his word is faithful. Number 2 voice, beginning in verse 6. A voice says, cry out. What shall I cry out? Well, what are you supposed to cry out? Don't get too bogged down in what we always see quoted in the New Testament about words and grass and so on. What's the message? The word of God stands forever. If God said it, it's going to happen. If God said it, it's going to happen. So we're trying to get this exalted view. God's saying, you've forgotten who I am. And the first thing I've got to get back under control for you is for you to understand who I am. Now, the next voice we read in verse 9. Bringing good tidings to Zion, going up on the high mountain, lift up your voice with a shout. Lift it up and do not be afraid. Here is your God. And what is the message? God is coming with power. The sovereign Lord, and maybe the sovereign is another emphasis. The sovereign Lord comes with power. He will rule, but also he will shepherd. He will care for you. You know, the fact that God is their God again. And so who is this God that is being declared as glorious, as dependable, whose word is certain, and the one who will come reigning and ruling with power and yet with tenderness? And so you begin to work through this, and my Bible has this underlined, not because it was built in, but because I underlined it. Who has measured the waters? I'm beginning in verse 12. Who has held the dust of the earth in a basket? Who has weighed the mountains on the scales? Who has understood the mind of the Lord or instructed him? Who has the Lord consulted so that he could be enlightened? Who has taught the Lord knowledge? Who has showed him the path of understanding? Well, we know the answer to that one. No one. In fact, that little phrase shows up in verse 15. The nations are like a drop in the bucket. The nations are, there's nothing comparable in all of that. So, to whom, now I'm at verse 18, to whom will you compare God? Who's going to be like God? To whom then will you compare this God? What image would be sufficient? And so we have 2 other parallel thoughts that close the chapter or finish the chapter. Do you not know? Have you not heard? Verse 21 and verse 28. Do you not know? Have you not heard? So what is the message? Do you not know? And I have these underlined in my Bible, but it's not built in. You'll have to do it yourself. He sits enthroned above the circle of the earth. He stretches out the heavens like a canopy. He brings princes to naught and reduces the rulers to nothing. He blows on them and they wither, a whirlwind sweeping away the chaff. To whom will you compare me? And then again, have you not heard? Don't you know? God, verse 28 again, I'm telling you, the Lord is an everlasting God, creator. So what can he do for you? Whatever you need. Whatever you need. And what we have here is that wonderful promise. Isn't it great to get a context out of this text in Isaiah 40, verses 28 through 31? I guess it's a powerful verse. It's so well known. You know, to rise up on wings as eagles and to run and not be weary and not faint. I mean, those are wonderful words, you know, of promise. And they've been many times cited with no context at all. But the context is what we sometimes miss, and that is, don't you understand who God is? God will never grow tired of you. God is not going to be wearied. You know, his understanding is so much beyond that he gets it. Even when you don't get yourself, even when you don't understand yourself, God understands you. So you're still his people. And he's got to get you back on track. And to get you back on track, he's going to have to get you home. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to do that yourself. You got yourself into this pickle, but you're not going to be able to get out by yourself. And so God is going to work. Now, to show you how he does that, because God is reclaiming his people. I'm telling you, God is reclaiming his people because of who he is and for his own glory. He says to them, I'll be your helper. I'm just looking at the paragraph headings in this NIV, beginning in 41, the helper of Israel, the servant of the Lord. And he called Israel to be the servant of the Lord in this text. When you think about it in, for example, 41:8, Israel, you're my servant. And I haven't let go of that. I'm not giving up on you. Jacob, you're the one I've chosen. You're the descendants of Abraham, my friend. I'm the one who rescued you from the ends of the earth. I'm the one who called you from the furthest corners. You are my servant. I've chosen you. And so I will be with you. Do not fear. I will be with you. Do not be dismayed. I'm your God. I'm thinking of 41, 9 and 10 here. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. I'm the Lord, your God. And I'm still the Lord, your God. And you're still my people. And you're still my servant. And then Jesus will come. The Messiah is mentioned in 42. Because I am the Lord. And there will come a servant to help you, despite the fact that you are blind and deaf. The heading of my paragraph in 42:18. Israel is blind and deaf. But this is what the Lord says, 43:1, the one who created you. I've summoned you and I will summon you again. You are precious and honored in my sight, 43:4, because I love you. Do not be afraid. I am with you. And so I will be merciful in the midst of your unfaithfulness. The rest of 43. You are my chosen one. So get back with it, guys. It's the Lord, not idols. This is, again, I'm just reading the headings, and I know what's in this heading, so it makes sense to me. Get with it. You're my chosen one, and so be loyal to me and not to the idols. I promise you this, 44:24, Jerusalem will be inhabited. You're going home. You're going home. That's what the Lord says. And I'm going to call an anointed one, that's Cyrus. In 45:1, he's mentioned by name. And that's another reason people have trouble getting this dated, because they don't want to date it until after Cyrus, because he's actually mentioned by name in the text before he becomes a ruler in a secular kingdom. He comes, and notice that he's called the Anointed One. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here on this, but notice that the idea, because anointed and Messiah are the same basic form in Hebrew. And so when you have this idea of anointed one, you don't always have to translate Messiah. It would kind of be a mistranslation to say Messiah here. This is what the Lord says to his Messiah, to Cyrus. It's only a problem because we don't understand it. See? And so it's the anointed one. And I just mention that because when you get to Daniel, we don't understand the book of Daniel, especially chapter 9, because the translators think every time you get this concept of anointed, they have to use it as a reference to Jesus. And they miss the fact that in the Old Testament, the kings were anointed, the priests were anointed, and even people who are being used by God are described as being anointed. So you got to read that context much more carefully. In fact, even Jerusalem is called the anointed city. And so that's just how my little hobby maybe about why people don't understand the book of Daniel as well as a lot of other Old Testament passages. So Jerusalem is going to be inhabited, and I'm going to make it happen to you if you'll just let it happen, because the gods of Babylon, chapter 46, will in no way be able to fight against Cyrus because he's my anointed. So we already know how that one's coming out. Babylon will fall, chapter 47. Oh, by the way, don't get to feeling good about this, because you are just as stubborn as a mule. You just don't get it. Listen, 48. You who call yourselves citizens of the holy city, you rely on the God of Israel, the Lord Almighty. I foretold you these things. And look at how he describes them in verse 4 of 48. I knew how stubborn you were. Your neck sinews, your neck muscles are like iron. You couldn't be decapitated if someone wanted to, because you'd be dulling the blade. It wouldn't go anywhere. Your forehead is bronze. I like this passage because when you talk about hitting your head against a brick wall, the idea of hitting your forehead against something, I think, well, if I had one of these bronze foreheads, it'd be a lot easier. Of course, I wouldn't be very pleasing to God if I was that stubborn. It's a picture of stubbornness. Nothing can get through there to work with that. So God has already predicted these things. So when you come, and I know I'm giving you a lot, but I'm just reading this, and I'm trying to read it in a context. And so he comes down here, as we were already there in chapter 48 and verse 40. He says, so when I give you a chance, 48:20, when I give you a chance, don't hang around in Babylon. I know you're liking it. I know they have really fancy food there, and I know life can get pretty easy. And it did for some of them. I mean, some of them kind of adapted. They liked being in captivity. It's kind of like when we do prison work. I've visited with people who were in prison, and they were very functional in prison. They were just not functional out of prison. In fact, we had a member of the church in Lansing, deceased now. His name was Raymond Jackson. He was in prison when I moved to the congregation in the center of Michigan. He got out. He was out 3 weeks. It was an armed robbery with an unloaded gun. Why? So he could go back to prison. So he could go back to prison. Because he converted people in prison. He was a preacher in prison. He knew what to do in prison. He liked living there. And that happened in the 12 years we were there. That happened twice. He'd get out, and he'd figure out how to get himself back in, because he was very functional there. Okay, well, that's just the illustration. I know it's kind of an interesting story, but it's kind of an illustration because some of Israel got pretty happy over in Babylonian captivity. You know, some of God's people, Judah, were very, very functional over there. And some of them were very sad because they were separated from the temple. Like in Psalm 137, kind of popularized in a more contemporary song, "By the rivers of Babylon, I sat down and wept." So you know, some of them recognize the absence of God from their life and the absence of worship. But so he says in 48:20, when you get a chance, and I give you that opportunity, leave Babylon, flee, announce this with shouts of joy and proclaim it, send it to the ends of the earth. The Lord has redeemed his servant Jacob. They did not thirst when he led them through the deserts. That's a reference to the Exodus. He got them through the wilderness, okay. When they came out of Egypt, he made water flow for them from the rock. He split the rock and the water gushed out. Don't worry about whether he can do this. And don't hesitate. You head home. Because when God is in control, there is no peace for the wicked. So that's the first piece of our puzzle. This is the first piece of this second part of the book of Isaiah. Okay, and I hope that was helpful to you to say this is what's happening. Because the whole point is you guys have got to get home. I need to hear someone comfort me. So this is designed as words of comfort. What do I need to know now? Words of comfort. You're going to comfort me. Someone's trying to comfort me. I'm trying to comfort someone in ministry. They need to know my promises are secure, that it's doable. It's one thing to say everything's going to be okay. But it's another thing to ask, can you really make that happen? Are you just telling me your faith, or do you have the power to make it happen? You know, what kind of promise is this that someone's making me? And so that's the next thing God takes care of here. And that is, you can depend on me. The word of the Lord is certain, because it's not comforting. It doesn't matter what someone tells you. Even if it's a word of comfort, it doesn't matter what someone tells you if they can't make it happen. You know, if they can make it happen, well, then it becomes a word of comfort. And so that's why, as we looked at chapter 40, and I hope that's in your mind now, who are you going to compare him to? Who is God? Who is God? Who is God? Who is God? So exalted. You know, one of the reasons we named our first son Michael is a word, and it's, of course, an Old Testament name. It means, who is like God? Who can be like God? It's a reminder. No one's like God. Who can be like God? We can make it possible, perhaps in our own life, because of his power. But who is like God? To whom will you compare your God? Who is your God like? And sometimes we lose sight of something, I think, and that is the God that was available to the nations was the same God as available to Israel. But I think God is saying, I am to you a God, your God, in a special way. And I think that about us. If we will be God's people, he will bless us in marvelous ways and comfort us, because he is the God of glory. He is the God who is dependable. His word is secure, and he comes both with sovereign power and tenderly taking care of our needs. So he is the helper of Israel. He's the one who will never grow tired, and if you follow him, he'll be beside you lifting up your hand when you're thinking that you're growing tired. That's the context of Isaiah 40, 28 through 31. That may not be fair to Isaiah 40, but somewhere we have to put a peg in the ground and say, okay, we're at mile marker, and I'm wondering if we're not at least to mile marker 41 now. So what's your comment on chapter 40? Let me see what I've given us here. Oh, I guess I got to the end somehow. I didn't mean to do that so quickly. Any comments on chapter 40? Okay. I hope that made some sense to you, because God is trying to say, I'm dependable. And he's promising to them in 41, help. You're my servant. I've not discarded you. I'm the one who has been with you forever, and I will continue to be. In 41, we read this already, 41:4, I'm the first and the last. I am the one, the Lord. And so he continually promises them that he will be with them, as in 41:10, which we have also already read, 41:13, which we also already read, for I am the Lord your God, taking you by the right hand, saying, do not. Isn't 41 a great chapter? Man, what a great chapter. How many promises for you and for me. Do not be afraid. I myself will help you. I'm your Redeemer. I'm the Holy One of Israel. And I will make the way for you. Rejoice in the Lord and glory in the Holy One of Israel. I. And as we move through chapter 41. So the people will see and know, 41:20, and consider and understand the hand of the Lord is the one that does this. The Holy One of Israel has created it. And so I can even declare things that are to come. I can declare that which is not yet. You can do something, but maybe not. It's still a source of dismay. Who is the one? Who is the God? And this is kind of a dual aspect of it. Who is the one who told you even before it happened? Who is the one who can make that kind of a promise? This is the helper of Israel. And so 40, 41 are really just this exalted view of God and his involvement in our lives to comfort. And then we kind of get down to the nuts and bolts beginning in 42. Boy, that was a quick mile. I wonder how fast we were going on that mile. That was we'd already been through it once. So we were kind of reviewing. But now he's going to be more specific to them about how he will use them and maintain them as his servant, but we'll also read about others who will be his method for rescuing them. But Babylon will never be able to stand against that which God brings to bear, to rescue his people. And his greatest concern may be in this first chapter, what if God rescues me and I don't want to be rescued? You know, that's a challenge. What if God rescues us and we really don't want to be rescued? Now, I'm going to leave that as something for you to think about and pray about this coming week. And I predict if you really do what I just asked you to do, it'll keep you busy this week and beyond. Thinking about how many times in my life have I refused to be rescued? And how many people do you know that have refused to be rescued? And so that's what this first 9 chapters is really about. Hey, when I let you loose, don't plan to sit around in jail any longer. Raymond Jackson. Any final word? Isn't it a fun book? Isaiah, you read it in context, but it is just an amazing piece of literature in the context where it belongs.
So much chaos going on. The final picture is the comfort in
God controls the chaos. Great. That's fantastic, Everett. That's fantastic. Okay, have a blessed week. Thank you so much, and bless someone else.